the Suwalki Gap. On the map, it looks like just a sliver of land. But in reality, it may be the most fragile corridor in Europe, a fault line where NATO's survival could one day be tested. Wedged between Lithuania and Poland, this narrow strip is widely considered NATO's weakest point. Military planners warn if war between Russia and NATO were ever to erupt, this 65-kilometer corridor could become the first and fiercest battlefield. Why? Because if Russian and Belarusian forces manage to close the gap, the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, would be cut off from the rest of Europe, cut off from NATO, cut off from help. In today's video, we will explore this sensitive region, the Suwalki Gap, and its role as the critical border between Europe and the Baltic states. We will see how Russia, with its heavily armed enclave of Kaliningrad, has become a constant threat to European security, and what the European Union, together with NATO, can do to defend itself. Stay with us. This is USMag. Germany's Chief of Defense, General Carsten Breuer, has already issued a stark warning. Russia is producing hundreds of tanks every single year, and by 2029, many of those machines could be aimed directly at NATO's eastern flank. At the very heart of this warning, the Suwalki Gap. Why the Suwalki Gap matters, like guiding the viewer through a map. This corridor is more than just geography. To NATO, it is the only land bridge that connects the Baltic states to their allies in Europe. To Moscow, it represents something else entirely, a tempting opportunity. On one side lies Belarus, Russia's loyal ally. On the other, Kaliningrad, a heavily militarized Russian enclave on the Baltic Sea. Today, Kaliningrad is connected to mainland Russia only by air. But if the Suwalki Gap were ever taken, Moscow would gain a direct land route linking Belarus to Kaliningrad, a prize too valuable to ignore. If that happened, the Baltic nations would be cut off. And Russia could go further still, imposing a naval blockade across the Baltic Sea, tightening the pressure until the region was strangled. A landscape of risk. Nature itself complicates the equation. The Suwalki corridor is not open farmland. It is covered in dense forests, rolling hills, and dotted with lakes. Terrain that favors defense, but also terrain that could turn into a bloody stalemate. For NATO, that makes the region both a shield and a trap. The strategic weight. Professor Dariusz Kozorowski of Poland's Jagiellonian University calls it a crossroads where NATO's and Russia's interests collide. If Moscow ever sees this corridor, NATO's 3 Baltic members would be left isolated. That danger was recognized long ago. In 2015, just after the annexation of Crimea, U.S. General Ben Hodges sounded the alarm to Washington. By 2018, he went further, describing the Suwalki Gap as a flashpoint that demanded urgent NATO reinforcement. For Poland, the stakes are even greater. Economically, the corridor is a lifeline for trade with the Baltic states. Militarily, it is indispensable, the only passage for troops, ammunition, and reinforcements to flow north in a crisis. Control of the gap, in peacetime or in war, means control of the Baltic's very survival. How regional states are responding. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania have already begun fortifying their defenses. In 2024, the 3 nations launched the Baltic Defense Line initiative, building anti-tank bunkers across nearly 1,000 miles of border. Poland has gone further still. Through its East Shield project, begun in late 2024, Warsaw is constructing barriers, fences, and fortified positions against Belarus and Kaliningrad. The project is set to finish in 2028. Recognizing their importance, the European Parliament declared both the East Shield and the Baltic Defense Line as essential pillars of Europe's security. Spending has soared. Poland now devotes over 4.7% of its economy to defense, more than any NATO ally. Lithuania is following suit, raising its military budget from 3 to 5% of GDP between 2026 and 2030. Meanwhile, frontline states, including Finland and the Baltics, have even moved to abandon the Ottawa Convention, the treaty banning landmines, arguing that the threat from Russia leaves them no choice. And yet, experts caution these steps may not be enough. Professor Kozorowski warns only massive, regular NATO drills, involving tens of thousands of troops and senior commanders, can truly prove deterrence against Moscow. So far, such exercises remain rare. Could Russia strike? Most analysts agree Russia is a threat, but as long as the war in Ukraine continues, a direct strike on the Suwalki Gap seems unlikely. Still, Justyna Gatkowska of the Center for Eastern Studies notes, Moscow's eyes remain fixed on NATO's northeastern flank. And if the war in Ukraine ends in Russia's favor, then the calculus changes. The Baltic states, Poland, Finland, Sweden, all could find themselves in Moscow's sights. Satellite evidence already shows Russia expanding its electronic warfare capabilities. In Kaliningrad, construction is underway on a vast signals intelligence hub designed to intercept NATO's tactical communications, radar networks, even civilian infrastructure. Reports in August 2025 revealed that from this one site, Moscow could watch deep into NATO territory. At the same time, Russia and Belarus continue joint maneuvers near their shared border. A massive new drill, Zapad 2025, is planned for September, but analysts warn these exercises can be more than drills. They can be cover, the same cover Russia used before seizing Crimea in 2014, and again before invading Ukraine in 2022. Putin has set the precedent: training today, war tomorrow. The unanswered question. Which leaves one haunting question: how will the United States respond? Across the Baltic states, unease is growing, because beneath the defenses, beneath the preparations, lies uncertainty. Uncertainty about whether NATO, and especially Washington, would act swiftly and decisively against a new act of Russian aggression. The Suwalki Gap may be just a narrow strip of land, but in the fragile balance of Europe's security, it could determine the fate of nations. Do you think NATO is ready to defend this fragile corridor, or is it Europe's greatest vulnerability? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to USMag, like this video, and share it with your friends and family.